Hey guys, back again with another video. I just recently beat another game after Last of Us, which I'm actually surprised I beat this game this quickly. And that is Tales of Xillia for the PS3. One of my most anticipated games of this year. I think it was like number 3 or something. I'm a huge fan of the Tales series. I'm pretty sure most of you know that. Basically, in terms of the North American released games, Tales of Destiny and Destiny 2 are the only games, although, well, really, Destiny 2 is Tales of Eternia, but those two games on the PS1 are the only North American released Tales games I haven't played. I still need to play those. Once I do, I think I'm going to do like a top 5 Tales video. Um, but Tales of Xillia, I was really excited for. Tales of Grace's F, the game that came out before this, that's actually one of my least favorite Tales games. I didn't really care for that one too much, but I was excited to play this one because the battle system looked better in my opinion. Just everything about this game looked more interesting. Uh, needless to say, I was pretty excited for this game, and I just beat it. It took 28. I think it took me 28 hours to beat this game, which that was unexpected. I wasn't expecting to beat this game that quickly. Now, uh, there were quite a few side quests I didn't do. In fact, I avoided most of them. I don't know. I'll explain that later, the side quest system in this game, but um, I didn't really do most of them. And there were a few optional dungeons that I still have left to do. There's a new game plus in this game. It's got a lot of replay value, this game. I'll go over why that is. Um, I'm not completely done with this game yet. So the 28 hours it took to beat it, really you could probably bump that up to maybe 40 to 50 hours with all the content done maybe. Actually, it could be more than that if you wanted 100% this game. But compared to most Tales games, this is quite short. Um, Tales games back when Vesperia was out, Vesperia Symphonia, Tales of the Abyss, in those games were like 60, 70 hour games, and that was your first playthrough. Tales games now are getting quite shorter, and I know the main reason for that. Um, I'll explain that later. But anyways, Tales of Xillia. I guess first off, the story, which I don't want to talk too much about this. As you guys know, I don't really talk about the stories in games that much because I really feel like the storylines in video games are something you need to experience for yourself to get the full surprises of what happens during the storyline. But in this game, you choose between two characters in the beginning, which is different from previous Tales games. Um, Either Jude or Mila. I went for Mila. I don't know if one is kind of an easier mode or whatever. The interesting thing though is that the storyline is essentially the same depending on who you choose, but there'll be different events throughout the game where all sorts of shit will happen with the other character for maybe a few hours of gameplay. There's one specific part towards the end of the game which I know is probably quite different. Um, for example, I chose Mila, so during one part of the game, I'll go through like a 2 hour section where I'm kind of by myself as Mila, while all Jude and the other characters are kind of are doing their own thing. And if we meet back up with each other, they'll explain in little small details of what happened, but not the full story. They don't give you the full story. In order to get that, you'll have to play through the game twice. So I'm actually interested to see those differences between the two characters once I play this again. But the interesting about Mila herself is that she's not human, and this is in the beginning of the game, so there's no real spoilers there. She's actually a spirit, and she's trying to destroy this lance of Kresnik. I really don't want to explain too much of this game because the story is just filled with all these different kind of twists. Jude is a medical student who finds himself crossing paths with Mila, and they kind of join together to take down a threat, and you meet characters along the way. I know I'm being very vague with the storyline, but I really don't want to go over too much of it because it's quite enjoyable. I think this game has probably one of the more interesting storylines of any Tales game. Now, I know a lot of people don't like Tales of Legendia on the PS2. That is probably my second favorite storyline. It's my favorite Tales storyline. I think it's fantastic, filled with different surprises, and it's not super convoluted like I thought Tales of the Abyss was, or even Vesperia for that matter. I don't know, the storyline I just thought was really engaging. And the thing about this game too, a lot of Tales games have really slow beginnings. The intros take a long time to get into. It's at least 4 or 5 hours before you're into the thick of things. Tales of Grace's F was suspect in this part. Like, that game took forever to get going. This game, they kind of throw you into things right away. You're fighting enemies, you're exploring a dungeon right in the beginning of the game, which I think that's a great thing. I think a lot more JRPGs should kind of strive for that. I know that's a lot of people's complaints with these JRPGs. But the storyline itself I thought was very interesting. A lot of people might say the antagonist is not that strong of an antagonist. I thought I think I disagree with that. But that's what I think about it for the storyline. The characters themselves. One of the things I love about the Tales games is the character development and the characters. And most of that is due to the large amount of voice acting and character interactions in these games, but also the skits. And there's a ton of skits in this game, like previous Tales games, where you'll press select at certain times throughout the game, and your characters will appear in these kind of like dialogue box type situations where they'll talk to each other, and they're fully voiced. The first few Tales games, like Symphonia and Abyss, they weren't voiced, which kind of sucked. But they're all voiced now, which is awesome. Because the voice acting, I'll briefly say that the voice acting in the Tales games is always top-notch. A lot of recognizable anime and anime-type game voice actors that you'll hear in this one, too. Now, these skits are all, like, quite a few of them are quite funny. They give great character interactions and character development. And because of these skits and all the interactions in the game, by the end of pretty much every Tales game, you're completely in love with these characters. Some are obviously better than others in certain games. The cast of characters in this game, I quite enjoy them, especially Mila. I think she's probably one of the strongest female protagonists I've seen in any game, really. More, not only just RPGs. Jude's another character that I'm quite fond of. I think he's a very interesting character too. This game, I will say, the sense of humor is not quite as strong as, say, in Tales of Vesperia or Legendia, actually, I thought was quite a funny game. There are some humorous moments in this game, but it also isn't quite as melodramatic, this game, as a lot of other Tales games. Tales of Grace's F, I thought, was a bit overkill in that regard. This game, it takes itself seriously, but it never crosses that territory where it's too melodramatic or too serious. So in that regard, I really like the storyline and the characters. Rowan was probably my least favorite character. I don't know, I thought personality-wise there wasn't much to him. I think his storyline is quite interesting. In fact, all the characters here have very strong arcs to them. Alvin is a particular character that I thought was very, very well done. His arc was very interesting. Yeah, a really strong cast of characters. Not my favorite cast of characters. That still goes to Tales of Vesperia. But a very strong one nonetheless. So that's basically story and characters, all fantastic. I'll go over the visuals, I guess. Visually, this is quite a good-looking game. Tales of Grace's F was a Wii port, so that game I felt didn't look all that great. This game was built specifically for the PS3, so it definitely is better presentation-wise. I will say a lot of the environments themselves, or maybe it's a bit hard to describe, but they're like flat and kind of like, I don't know, there's just not a whole lot of detail to them in terms of like the more forested and like plains environments. The towns themselves are amazing. They look phenomenal. There is some weird like pop in this game. You'll be walking through towns and like people will automatically just pop into view. The view distance in this game is really actually quite poor. So in some regards, this game, from a visual standpoint and in other areas I'll go into later, can feel a bit rushed. But overall, I think this is a very good-looking game. The anime cutscenes in this game, there's not too many of them, but there are a few, are some of the best anime cutscenes I've seen in a video game ever. They're super high quality. The lip syncing in them, too, is outstanding, as well as in the game itself. I was actually kind of surprised by that. But visually, a very nice game. A lot of cool environment designs. Um, just yeah, quite a nice game to look at. Though I kind of hope the Tales games get a bit better in this regard. I mean, compared to the Final Fantasy games, I mean those on a technical level look much better. Artistic level, though, I'm gonna still give it to the Tales games, and this game looks quite good. Music wise, not the Tales games historically haven't had the greatest music. I'll fully admit that. Tales of Vesperia is still my favorite soundtrack, and even then, it was decent at best. It's not. None of the tracks are bad. Like Tales of Grace's F, I thought actually had a rather poor soundtrack. The tracks in this game just aren't all that memorable. There were a few later in the game that I actually quite liked. Some very jazzy, kind of odd, bizarre tracks that, oddly enough, I liked the most. Everything else is very kind of generic sounding. It's your typical Tales soundtrack most of the time. So that is one part of the game I wasn't too fond of. But the Tales games I've kind of come to expect kind of subpar soundtracks now, which is unfortunate. Control-wise, as with every Tales game, perfect. Nothing to complain about there. But I think that's about it in terms of presentation-wise. Now I guess I'll go into the big chunk of the game, the important part to me, the gameplay. First, I'll go over the battle system. Tales games have always used, I don't know what they call it. They have like a certain name for it. Tales of Grace's F's battle system, I wasn't actually all that fond of. I thought the CC system was actually kind of restrictive. And I missed like the free running. Evading and dodging in that game was pretty awesome, and it had a more of a, I don't know, it felt almost more fluid than this game's combat system. But I much enjoy the combat in this game. Free run is back. You can hold the L2 button and freely run around, and then if you let go, you're back into like a kind of a 2D plane. The arts are of course back. You can set your powers to different button combinations, like holding the left toggle and pressing the circle button to use kind of your arts. Now this game, the new thing with the battle system in this game, there's a few things, but linked arts. You can link up with your team members, and if you use a certain art, you can press the R2 button and kind of combine it with the team member you're linked with, and you can do like a linked art. And there's a ton of these different like linked art combinations you can mess with. So there's a ton of customization there. You can mess with all your different partners that you have in the game, and that adds quite a bit of depth to the game that I quite enjoyed. Mystic arts are back too, where if you use I forget what they call it. If you use a certain art, and then if you hold X, you'll do a mystic art when your over limit bar is full. Which over limit bar is back too, where if you keep attacking enemies and use linked arts, this bar will fill up. And once it reaches the maximum point, you use another linked art, and then you go into over limit mode, where all your movement speed is increased, your attacks increased, everything is increased. It's basically super crazy power mode. And in that mode is when for a limited time, you can use linked arts like mad. And then you can use the mystic arts, which are these massive, like, cutscene heavy, or it is basically a cutscene attack, where you do a massive attack in a cutscene, similar to, like, the summons in Final Fantasy. But they're not too long in this game. They're just right. Unfortunately, compared to the previous Tales games, there's not as many of them here, which was kind of a disappointment. A lot of people say that Tales of Xillia feels rushed and is lacking a lot of the content that previous Tales games have. I'll go over that too, which I do agree. I do pretty much agree with that. The combat, as with all Tales games, is just really fast, really fun, really action based. Each character plays completely different from the other. In terms of the combat, you're given skill points, or where you can kind of, like this was in previous Tales games, but you can equip skills with different characters. They get skill points. You can have different skills, and there's a shit ton of them that you can pick and choose from, which definitely adds some variety. Now, the leveling up system in this game is actually quite different compared to previous Tales games. Now, at first, I didn't really like it. It's called the Lilium Orb system, where basically each character has this massive orb where you get like these points for every level up. And you kind of put them into this orb and pick and choose what kind of upgrades you want, whether it be health, TP points, And basically, if you cover a different area, like if you connect 4 dots together, they give you a certain art or a certain skill. And these orbs can get quite huge. There's multiple levels to them, and you're putting points into this orb. So it gives the game a nice customization that I felt was kind of lacking in previous Tales games. At first, I didn't really dig the Lilium orb system, but as I played the game more and got more skills, I actually came to appreciate it. And by the end, I loved it. Um, I don't know if I want it in the next Tales game. I kind of like when they try something different with each new iteration. Uh, but I quite enjoyed the Lilium Orb system. What else? And as with other Tales games, you can use items during mid-battle. You can change characters within mid-battle. You can set character strategies. There's just a whole lot to this battle system, and it always remains fun. As with every Tales game, it's addictive. It remains fun. It makes it so that even if this game had random encounters, it wouldn't be that bad. And it actually kind of almost does have random encounters at times. It's just such an enjoyable battle system. One of my favorite iterations of it. In fact, I think it's probably tied with Tales of Vesperia as my favorite battle system in a Tales game. Um, in terms of other parts of the gameplay, now this game's got another system in this game which I absolutely love is the shop upgrading system. But different Tales games have different kind of systems. In Tales of Grace's F, you had the crafting system, which I wasn't into that so much. The upgrade system in this, basically, you can donate materials that you find in the game to upgrade shops, and they kind of raise in level and get new products, and you get new discounts depending on how high the level goes. So this is how you get new weapons and armor in the game, is that every time you collect new materials out on the on your adventure, you come back to these shops and you upgrade them. And these shops are the same throughout the game, so you don't have to go to specific shops in like an early town to get certain armor. They kind of progress through the entire game. So by the end of the game, you'll have like massive weapons and armor. So this kind of, not only does it make it so that I guess you could technically, if you collect so many materials, you can kind of get overpowered maybe early in the game. But I thought this was just a really fun system. It made it exciting to kind of level up your shops. Your accessory, weapons, armor, item, and food shops. I didn't actually mess with the food stuff too much. I found I didn't really need that. As far as I know, I didn't see any kind of cooking system in this game other than that, the food shops. But I didn't really bother with that kind of stuff. Maybe I should. I don't know. But this shop upgrading system, really addictive. I love it. I actually kind of hope they kind of stick with this throughout the next Tales games, because I really love it. Now, I'm giving quite a bit of praise to this game, but there are some parts of this game that I don't really like too much. There definitely are some flaws with this game. First off, I want to mention the environments. Now, dungeon-wise, they're actually, compared to a lot of other Tales games, there's not many dungeons in this game. What there are, though, in terms of dungeons, are good. There's no actual puzzles in this game. A lot of Tales games had puzzles. Vesperia still has my favorite dungeons, I think, because the puzzles weren't too tedious, but there weren't too many of them either. Tales of Grace's F, I thought, had the worst dungeons in the entire Tales series. Like, the dungeons in that game I thought were just the worst. Like, especially towards the end, I thought they were some of the most tedious dungeons ever. This game, the dungeons definitely are tedious. They're just really short, and there isn't very much of them, which I felt was kind of I felt that the game was lacking in that regard. But what I didn't really like too much were the environments themselves. A lot of times you'll be walking from town to town in these kind of wide open environments. Now, from like presentation wise and how they look, they're very different from one another. But the layouts themselves are always the same. It seems very wide open areas with monsters just kind of thrown randomly and walking about. A few little crawling parts where you can kind of crawl. You can kind of crawl through holes and open treasure chests, and you have random treasure chests and materials kind of just thrown about. And all the layouts are like this in like pretty much in the entire game, and it gets repetitive very quickly. You can actually, because of these environments, you can choose to skip like basically every enemy in the game, other than enemies in dungeons, which I guess you could like this game's very speedrun. Yeah, you could very easily speedrun this game extremely quickly. So you kind of choose which enemies to kind of take on. I took on like maybe half of the enemies in each of these wide open areas, but I don't know. I kind of found it repetitive. Um, it's definitely worth your while to explore these areas and get all the materials, but in terms of fighting enemies, that's all you can really do. And it was kind of a shame because early on you had these environments where you were kind of climbing up places and kind of the environments were kind of maze-like, but in a good way. You're trying to figure out what direction you were supposed to be headed in, and they were kind of interesting towards the beginning of the game, but then the layout started to become repetitive. And these kind of areas kind of replace the world map, which the world map was a staple of the Tales series up until Tales of Vesperia. But after that game, they ditched the world map, which this is my biggest complaint with this game, as with all newer Tales games. I really miss the world map. It just added a sense of scope and scale to these games, which Xillia is lacking because of the lack of it. And I think that's the main reason why these Tales games are shorter too. You can just fast travel in this game to wherever you want. It cuts down on tedium, but I don't know. I still kind of miss that fully explorable world map with all these different optional places you could go to, which this game just doesn't have that many. Um, but I don't know. I think this is a step up from Tales of Grace's F, which had these like very linear point A to point B kind of roads that you traveled on. I didn't like how that game did it. I think this game does it a bit better, but uh, I don't know. I still miss the world map, and these wide open environments that look all the same. It gives the game a kind of lazy feeling. Like you can tell this game was made in a much shorter time than say Tales of Vesperia was. Um, so I really didn't care for that too much. So I guess overall, my biggest complaint with Tales of Xillia is kind of the rushed feeling of the game. Another instance of that is basically the lack of content compared to previous Tales game. Tales of Grace's F even had a lot more optional content. Um, this game is lacking. I don't think there's like the spa in this game, which was it featured in previous Tales game, which was always one of my favorite parts of Tales games. I don't know, though that wasn't in the game. There's a few other things I'm not going to mention, but it just feels a lot less big, really, than previous Tales games. I did forget to mention the side quest system in this game, which is basically different townsfolk in towns will have like green exclamation points over their heads, and that means they can give you a quest. Usually these are simple like fetch quests. They could be a bit more complex than that. They reward you with gold and like these kind of accessories that you can put on your characters. And that's one of the main reasons I didn't really do too many of them. If they gave experience or maybe a bit more interesting rewards, because all the accessories I got were kind of, I don't know, they were kind of lame, I thought. But I don't know, I just didn't really feel compelled to do these side quests. I think the system they have is quite good. It kind of makes you want to explore these towns more. But I don't know, I think the side quests themselves are fairly enjoyable. Um, and in the menus you can easily tell what you're supposed to be doing. I want to briefly mention that the menus in the Tales games have always been so easy to navigate, and so I don't know, so nice looking. Very minor praise to that, but I do enjoy the menus in the Tales games quite a bit. The side quest system, I like it. I just wish the rewards for the side quests were a bit better. I mean, gold in this game is so easy to come by. You'll always have so much of it that I don't know. I felt there never really was a need to do side quests. Actually, one thing I do want to mention too about this game, the difficulty. A lot of people say this game is the easiest Tales game. I played it on normal. I think the normal enemy encounters are fairly easy. The bosses, though, especially towards the end, I don't know. I had a bit of trouble with them. Uh, I do agree. This game probably is the easiest Tales game overall. I'm not sure if you bumped it up to the harder difficulties. I know even on easy difficulty, the other Tales games were actually a lot more difficult than this one. But you know me in difficulty. I generally, in a game like this with multiple difficulty levels, to me it's like, that's just, higher difficulty just means enemies have higher health, you have less health. Like, that to me, like, I'm not too big into that kind of difficulty. Um, but yeah, difficulty-wise, I thought it was just right for my tastes. Another very minor complaint, this is super minor, the enemies in this game I noticed are a lot more aggressive. If you get anywhere near close to them, they'll immediately run after you. So the only way to actually get to sneak on to get a sneak attack on them, if you come up from behind, you'll do damage to them before you enter the battle. If they sneak up on you, you'll be at a disadvantage. That's in the previous Tales games. They're super aggressive, so the only way is to hold circle and walk very slowly and then come up behind them. Like that, I felt just brought the game down to this halting pace. In previous Tales games, you could kind of get around enemies without having to, resort to a super slow movement speed. And because of that, I just never bothered with the sneak attacks. I always just fought enemies head on. A very minor complaint, but something that kind of bugged me slightly. But yeah, I think that about covers it for Tales of Xillia. Overall, a fantastic game. I had some minor quibbles. Is it my favorite Tales game? You'll have to wait, I guess, until a list. I will say though, Tales of Vesperia, I still much prefer. That's still my favorite Tales game, and unless they bring back world maps, I can't see it ever being beaten really. But yeah, fantastic game. Is it so far my game of the year? Maybe. I think Ni no Kuni is the only game I've played this year that's about equal to it in quality. And that game, well, I could say that game is actually probably the better game overall. I had more fun playing Tales of Xillia. If there's something to take from Xillia, amazing storyline, amazing characters, and the battle system just makes it such a fun game. I don't know, it's flat out fun. But yeah, definitely. I haven't played too many games this year, so it's kind of unfair to kind of rank them all at this moment. There's still tons of games I have to play, tons of games I missed. But Tales of Xillia, definitely, if you're into JRPGs, definitely go and grab it. Definitely worth the price. If you're not into JRPGs, then I'd say kind of skip it. It's got all those typical cliches and stereotypical moments of JRPGs. I mean, it's a Tales game. You know what to expect if you play Tales games. It's a JRPG, you know what to expect from a JRPG like this. But if you are into them, or if you're on the fence or anything like that, or if you love Tales and you haven't got it yet, definitely get on this game. Really, really fantastic game. But anyways, that's it, guys. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.